Welcome. My name is Okubo Benebo. The scoping of the farm produce of the selected essential crops as performed for the subsistence farming is a necessary task for the purposes of ensuring healthful living. Clearly, the scoping enables the farmer to discover deficiencies in the healthful quality of select essential crops and accordingly expand the scope, which currently consists of the essential crops and soy, quinoa, and fish. The healthfulness quality of the new additions, soy, quinoa, and fish, actually duplicate each other, yet have all been included in taking the lifestyle of vegans into consideration. The vegan's lifestyle prefers eating plant than flesh of any kind, and hence the need for the additional crops when the fish does the same. After all, because there is already plants in the essential crops, fish would have been preferable, but vegans also have to be healthful. So the plant's food scope got expanded despite the inclusion of the fish. So then, in pattern maintenance of the farming activities prevailing, the sowing of the quinoa, the cultivating of the quinoa plant, and invariably the related harvesting continue the farming activities of the subsistence farming. Significantly, the scoping undertaken leading to the inclusion of the additional 3 food items results in the human body being availed with all the proteins it needs to function healthfully and without suffering the stresses of even one node of the metabolic reaction network utilizing amino acids being vacant, with the concomitant reaction inefficiencies resulting from the imbalance of the pool between the node of one type of protein and the body is manufacturing versus a node whole having dormant enzyme as the network reactions progressed. Also known in the science, of course, is that exposure of one form of biologic into a non-source organism often results in a modification of the biologic, no matter how slight. So then it means the contents of amino acids of quinoa can be significantly increased by enriching the biofertilizers with soybean amino acids or carboxylic acids that the quinoa cells can transform biologically into amino acids, and rather readily consequent on the short-circuiting of the metabolic reactions by the anabolic reactions that otherwise would have had the task of producing the carboxylic acids. Of course, such also raises the consideration of whether or not it is equally feasible to provide the missing proteins by means of chemical synthesis as per GGS amino acids process, such that the amino acids upon assimilation are simply reset by the new organism, which in this case is quinoa, while acknowledging the fundamental difference between biologically synthesized substances and chemically synthesized substances. The relevance of the consideration is rooted in the fact that the amino acids acquired from the 3 added foods are admittedly biological amino acids being produced within a biological context, and therefore may be applied to boost the amino acid content of each other, as done in episode 22 for the soy famine. In a naivety understanding, the differences can be attributed, however, to the phenomenon of biocondensation that accompanies biologic reactions as solution chemicals get converted into biological active substances. In synopsis then, this episode entitled Farming Complete Proteins Quinoa presents the planting of the myriad versions of quinoa under a common didactic guidance, so both the novice and the expert benefit from the knowledge. Special treatment of the biofertilizers as to dynamically uplift the fruitfulness of the soil and consequentially the productivity of the quinoa plants, and ultimately the evolving of the soy farming process for implementation in the farming process automation controller system. The driver rationale guiding farming the essential food quinoa has the object of evolving a unified planting approach suitable for planting all variants of quinoa, such that every subsistence farmer of quinoa need know only one method. A starting point of this unification of planting scheme, of course, is the fixing of the planting specification such that the same specification also applies to all quinoa variants. Now then, quinoa is planted over a widespread condition of temperature as long as the temperature is not lower than 60 degrees Fahrenheit and not higher than 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So then the planting condition could be fixed at between 60 and 70, with 65 being the preferred target temperature for planting. And by similar reasoning, that the highest temperature tolerated in the farm would be put at between 80 and 90 degrees Fahrenheit, with the upper bound temperature set at 85. By the way, it is also known that the plant tends to simply grow and not readily bloom so long as the sunlight is very bright and also shines for time spans comparable relative to the day-night hours split. Then, of course, the longer it takes to bloom, the more bountiful the harvest. So then, the planting scheme must also consist of a singular planting approach that carefully graduates the intensity of the light irradiated on the plant to be such as to induce maximum yield of bean pods. By these driver rationale, then, a unified approach development can be easily presented, advanced. Yet, the planting would still start with the seeds. Further, the planting of the quinoa is being done on one ridge or single row, and with the seeds to be placed 1 to 2 feet apart and 1 to 1.5 inches deep. As always, the planting activities start with preparing the ridge for the planting. Comparatively, the biofertilizers used for the planting of quinoa is somewhat different from the version used in the soybean planting. The fact that quinoa is not susceptible to microbial infections meant regular biofertilizers without much zinc could be applied for the planting. Now then, at about 4 inches from one end of the ridge, a 4-inch diameter by 1 foot deep hole is scooped out. Sunken bed containers are embedded and then refilled with zinc-enhanced biofertilizers. This is replicable through centers, through the span of the ridge, with 2 feet spacing in between centers. The biofertilizers filled holes are then watered wet and then left overnight. At about 24 hours later on the following day, coming on now to the onset of the actual planting, with the biofertilizers appearing to be reasonably dry, a spherical hole of diameter 0.5 to 1 inch is scooped out, and 1 quinoa seed or bean placed in the middle of the apparent bowl and then covered with the biofertilizer that was scooped out. This covering with biofertilizer serves two purposes: provide a cover for the seed and the seedling through germination, and also form film-like coating cover on top of the soil, which prevents extreme evaporation of water, yet lets the water diffuse through and effectively keeps the soil around the root always humid. The sowed seeds are lightly watered regularly until the seeds grow out of the soil above the surface. The light disperser's irradiation of the sunlight is then calibrated to be of high intensity. The light disperser network mostly uses the accentuators in this case to provide high intensity light in an improvised control light variant space. Under these conditions, the plants are guaranteed to grow to a height of 36 inches, but the higher yield plants grow up to 72 in height, and that is desirable. The growth to 72 inches is induced with a slight change of the biofertilizer, somewhat about the 4-inch diameter, scooped out at start of the planting process or over the surface of the sunken bed. Carboxylic acids and amino acids are poured over, placed over the surface, and then slightly watered to cause a diffusion into the soil all about the roots of the plants. These give the plants sturdiness to grow higher. Biocondensation, however, being a dynamic occurring at the quantum magnetic scale, suggests that two biologically synthesized substances may be better compatible than not. So it would seem that invariably it is better to use the biologically synthesized amino acids than the chemically synthesized amino acids, such as in GGS amino acid process, unless a substitution for use in the lack thereof of the biologically synthesized amino acid, which by happenstance is available in large quantities through the added foods. Even so, in the absence of biologically synthesized amino acids or carboxylic acids, the origin of the substance may not matter here so much regarding whether the substances are sourced from chemical synthesis agents, because in context, the plant has a base substance on which to merely effect the biocondensation that brings about the biologically synthesized amino acid contents of the cell. Finally, the control task sequence of the light intensity tuning, the root space watering program, the soil infusion of carboxylic and amino acid process, as well as the usual farming tasks as weeding and spaces, are integrated into a coherent Quinoa farming process and then integrated into the farm process automation control system, as discussed in episode 10 by the characteristics as template. Then, after the plants reach about 60 inches in height, the irradiation of the light disperser is turned on full intensity so that the plants begin to prepare to bloom and grow buds that are saturated with amino acids drawn up from the roots when being fertilized. The conclusion that can be drawn here is that, in fact, a unified planting scheme for quinoa can be abstracted as related here and adopted for subsistence farming such that ensure bountiful yields, but even more significantly, produces yields that are of unusually high contents of amino acids. All three added foods are valid to be chosen with careful consideration. In a sense, the presentation of the farming activities of quinoa here is not absolute. A farmer still does not have to choose quinoa to satisfy that complete amino acids need, or even start off with the essential crops relative to which the scoping has been performed. And it is a wrap. On that note, I say to you, thank you so much for having come to listen to this observation about efforts aimed at alleviating world hunger through subsistence farming by both urban dweller farmers and emergent country small farm farmers. You are truly appreciated, and if you would like to get privileged viewer or reader information, or access podcasts of specialized contents, or access even vertically integrated concepts, then I implore you to join my supporter club and enjoy that privileged status. Moreover, while still here, do please take a moment and subscribe to the channel as to be informed of the publication of every new episode as soon as it is released. Thank you. Bye. Till next episode.